Welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the overall initial setup of SAP Build. So what I have here is I have a completely fresh SAP BTP environment. Nothing installed yet, and I'm going to take you through the whole process from the very beginning to the complete installation of all the components and parts of SAP Build, as well as testing along the way to make sure that everything that we're installing and setting up is ready to be used. So let's get into setting up an SAP Build environment. So here we are in my SAP BTP Subaccount. As you can see here, it's completely empty. No subscription, no instances, no runtime. I'm going to start by creating a subscription to a tool that's going to help us with the majority of the installation. And that's the Cloud Integration Automation tool. So to take just a couple minutes for this to complete its setup, and then this is the tool we're going to use to help set up the rest of the SAP Build environment. So my subscription is complete, but before I can use this Cloud Integration Automation, I need to give myself authorization to be able to use it. So all the roles needed for this tool were imported when I created the subscription. So I just need to come over to my user, and I'll go into the Assign Role Collections. And there we see the integration admin, expert, monitor. I probably just need the admin, but I'll go ahead and add that. As well as while I'm in here, because this is a fresh sub-account, I don't have any authorizations. So I'll go ahead and give myself the rest of the authorizations that I might need to do anything in this sub-account. Now that I have the authorizations, I can go back to my subscription. Here we are with the Cloud Integration Automation, and I can launch the tool right here from the BTP cockpit. Here we see the Cloud Integration Automation service, and we want to plan for integrations. And you see there's a whole lot of different options to choose from here. But we want the one under SAP Build, and we can choose to set up SAP Build or choose to set it up and also set up initial integrations with S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition. I'm going to go with just the setup of SAP Build and not do the integration with any particular S/4HANA system. Now, the Cloud Integration Automation tool is going to guide us through the process of setting up SAP Build. We're going to have to start by giving it some information about the systems that we want to target, both the BTP account and sub-account and the BTP Identity Authentication Service. Now, I have a large list of BTP systems that I have access to. So I'm going to search here and narrow down the list. And here is the global account that I have been given to use for this video. That's my empty global account. And now I need to choose a BTP Identity Authentication Service. So you have to have the Identity Authentication Service set up in advance. I have one that we've used in other videos and other demos, so I'm going to choose that existing one. I've searched for it, I've narrowed it down. So now my next step is to just verify that these are the landscapes that I want to proceed in. This is the BTP Global account. This is the Identity Authentication Service that I want to use. And we can see here, again, it's showing us which systems we're going to target, gives us some URLs to the cockpit or the administrative console if we want to check anything before we actually start the installation and setup process. Everything looks good. It's the systems that I've been provided. So now we get to the scope step. Here we say what parts of SAP Build do we want to install? And I'm going to use all of them. I want Build Apps, Build Process Automation, the Task Center, and SAP Build Workzone. And that's pretty much the scope of what will be installed by this Cloud Integration Automation service. Now, that's not all of SAP Build. As you'll see later in the video, there are some additional steps that we'll set up ourselves after we complete this entire wizard that's provided here in the Cloud Integration Automation Service. Now, there's some additional parameters I need to provide, such as what user will be the developer and the administrator. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to set myself up as both. Now, the default setup is to actually create an SAP BTP Subaccount. But I already have an existing BTP Subaccount that's empty. Somebody already set it up for me. It doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of, giving it the parameters of the BTP Subaccount and having it create it for me, I'm going to give it the parameters of my existing subaccount, give it the same subdomain, same description, the same name, and the same region. And then what it'd do is it actually fail when it gets to this step to create it, and I'll tell it that's okay. It already exists. And that'll actually show you some of the flexibility that we have here with the Cloud Integration Automation Service, is that it allows you to do manual steps outside or override some of the automation steps, but then continue the overall automation. I'll just double check all of my parameters here. Everything looks good. It's what I want. So I'll go ahead and start. It shows us what all is going to be provisioning SAP Build. We can see that it has started the integration scenario. And from this point, we can click on the link to open the scenario execution. That's going to take us to an inbox where we'll see the overall status of the scenario, all the possible steps that it will go through, and where we are on the current step. And we see that it did a few of the steps behind the scenes. It already got 12% of the way into the process, and it stopped here actually on this first step. Now, the Cloud Integration Automation Service has actually tried to accomplish the first step, which is to create the SAP BTP Subaccount, but it errored out. And this is one of the things I like about the tool. You can easily see what errors occurred on what steps. For instance, right here, it has errored out because my subaccount already exists, which I knew was going to happen because I supplied an existing subaccount. At this point, I can see where I am in the overall execution. So I can go back and track my progress in the scenario monitoring app, which is going to show me which step that I errored out on. So we see this opens in a separate tab. We see all the possible steps, and we see right here on Create BTP Subaccount, it errored out with an automation error. And then I can navigate back into that particular step if I hadn't kept it open in another tab. And in this case, because my BTP Subaccount already exists, I want to just say task completed. And this allows you to also do tasks manually if you want, and then continue with the automation. The only thing is they can't know the subaccount ID for the already existing one. So I'll go supply that manually into the parameters for this step, and then I'll say task completed. This will record that information for later steps. It's going to double check and make sure that I'm responsible for completing the task manually, but then the automation will continue. Now, the Cloud Integration Automation Service has immediately taken us to the next step. I also like this mode of operation so that I can do it one step at a time and immediately check the results if necessary. This step is just to set the entitlements on my BTP Subaccount for Cloud Foundry. And it just needs my BTP credentials to authenticate and perform the action as me. So I'll go ahead and put in my BTP account password. And I will see, we can see the status is not executed. If I say execute, then it's going to perform the automated task again with the new parameters. We see that it goes into in progress for a second or two. Some of the steps take a little longer than others, but we should see this turn green. There we are. And it's successful this time. We could look at the log, but there's really no reason to if it's successful. And now we just tell it task completed, and you've seen the process of completing a fully automated task as well. And I want to stress at this point, we could continue with a completely automated setup, but I want to show you each step so I can explain it to you as I go. Now, this is a pattern you're going to see repeated throughout this process, that we first have to add the entitlement, which gives the rights to a service, and then we have to actually enable the service. In this case, we're now enabling Cloud Foundry on our sub account. So again, it pulls in the credentials and it remembers them from the previous step. So we didn't have to put them in every time. And behind the scenes is actually provisioning a Cloud Foundry runtime in our BTP Subaccount. So again, this would take a couple seconds, and we see it's gone green, successful, so we can say task completed. Now, before we go check it, why don't we do one more thing? There's two that are closely involved here for Cloud Foundry. It's setting up the Cloud Foundry environment and then enabling a space or creating a space within that Cloud Foundry environment. So we'll go ahead and go on to the next step, which again, very simple. It only wants the authentication. We'll say execute step, and it should only take a couple seconds for the space to be created. We see it's in progress now. And just a second or two here, and it should be finished. There it is, successful. And this time, before we go on to the next step, I'm going to go over to the BTP cockpit and show you what it actually completed. And we'll say that it is complete, but in the meantime, while that's moving us to the next step, I want to go actually verify in the BTP cockpit that it created what it said that it did. So I'll switch over here to my BTP cockpit, and we see there was no Cloud Foundry environment previously, but if I refresh the cockpit screen, when it reloads, you see we have a BTP Cloud Foundry environment now, and it has a space. So we're ready to be able to deploy apps into this BTP subaccount. All right, in this next step, I want to establish the trust between the BTP subaccount and the identity authentication service that I put in at the very beginning of this process. And you see here, I got an error message. And this is actually a really great example of how we deal with errors during the automation flow. If I come here and I look at the details of the error message, I'll see, all right, I got an error while calling the IAS to set up the trust. It's because that identity authentication service was not valid for the particular BTP subaccount that I was using. The cost centers didn't match on them. Well, all right, I messed up. I used the wrong identity authentication service. It's great because I can show you how we can very easily recover from such an error. I don't have to start the whole wizard over or scrap what's been done. I can just change at this point to a different identity authentication service. I went and I found the correct one that I should be using. I replace the parameter, and then I tell it to execute again. We'll give it a couple seconds to process with the new value, and it should come back here this time in progress, hopefully success. So we get a very clean flow, and I'm coming in here just to make sure. And now I can go back over to the BTP cockpit, go to the trust configuration, and we'll see exactly what is added. It has added the identity provider and set it up so that it's available for user login. So we know that this step is now successfully completed. We verified it. We can say task complete. And this is how I'll do the flow throughout the rest of this video. We'll perform a step, then we'll go over and show you what it did from the cockpit. In this next step, we're going to want to create two different service instances, both the destination and the XSUAA service. So this is actually the first step that's going to do more than one task. So when I say execute step, we're going to see that both are now prepped, and the first one has started, the XSUAA. That's creating a service instance that will help our applications authenticate. Now it's creating the destination service that will allow us and our applications to use BTP destinations. Now, they're both complete. Now, I did trim the time that it took to be done a little bit for the purposes of the video. So when you do it for real, it could take a little bit longer. To check it, we'll go over to instances and subscriptions. And now we see that we have two new service instances, the destination service and the XSUAA service. So we'll complete the task, and that'll move us on to our next step. In this next step, we're going to want to disable the default IDP, the identity provider, so that only the custom one is used. But before we do this, I actually want to come over and add some authorizations to my user. I'm going to have currently only a user for the default IDP, but I'm going to add my user so that it's also available via the custom IDP that we're about to switch over to. And while I'm in here, I want to give myself some authorization under this other IDP. I want to make sure that I have all the admin rights that I need to continue processing as this user. Because after I make this configuration change, I won't be able to log on as my user from the default IDP anymore. All right, now that I've set up to make sure my user will have access still after I run this step, I can go ahead and execute the task. This one should be relatively quick, but you know what? It's defaulting back to my original value. I need to change it to my updated IDP. I didn't realize this when I was originally recording, but I could have hit the little save icon and then would have persisted my overridden value. I'll do that a little bit later in the video once I figured out that I had that ability, and I wouldn't have to keep changing things. So if you do change a parameter like I've done part of the way through, just hit the save icon. Now, we want to verify this change was made. If I go back to trust configuration, you'll see that available for user logon is no longer set for the default identity provider, only our custom one. Therefore, it's complete, and I can go ahead and mark this task as complete and move on to the next step. And now we have another entitlement step. This one is going to set the entitlements on our BTP Subaccount for SAP Build Workzone Standard Edition. Now, it will set both the entitlement for the application and for the service. So this was done fairly quickly. Let's go over and verify that it's done what it said it did. So I'll change to the BTP cockpit here in my other tab. There we are. And you see it hasn't created any new instances yet or applications. It's only set the entitlements. So let's go to the entitlements on the left-hand side. And if we search for build, there we see it is set up build work zone, and it's set both the plan, the build default for the application, and build default for the service as well. Now we're ready to create the instances or activate SAP Build Work Zone. And like all these steps, we have the manual instructions, again, if we need them. But I'm going to let the automation do most of the work for me here. I didn't have to put in any new parameters. It remembers everything from the previous steps. So it's going to go ahead and first create the application for Build Work Zone. That's what we run to actually administer Build Work Zone. And then it will create a service instance and service key for us. And that's how we programmatically interact with Build Work Zone. If I come back over to the BTP cockpit and refresh my view of the instances and subscriptions, we'll see that under subscriptions, we have a new application subscription to Build WorkZone, and that's how we can launch it. And we have the instance. Next, we're going to need authorization for the Build WorkZone. Now, I'm going to scroll down here and actually check the documentation. You should be checking the documentation of each step because there are some steps that include manual things that you need to do as well. I'm going to go ahead and execute this. There were no manual steps on this one. There are going to be some in the near future, and we're going to see those when we get to them, of course. It'll take a few seconds for each of the row collections to be created, and they're getting assigned to my user by right away by the wizard here. If I go back over to the BTP cockpit and I look at my user, we should see that the row collections were both created and they've already been assigned to my user. For instance, there's Launchpad and Launchpad Admin and Admin Theming. So we know that they were correctly created and assigned to our user. We can go ahead and complete this task. Then we're going to follow a very similar pattern for the next step, which is the entitlements for the task center. The task center is a centralized inbox service that is part of WorkZone. So first, adding the entitlements themselves, just like we did before with WorkZone. Now that the entitlements have been added, we'll switch over to the BTP cockpit. And again, no instances and subscriptions yet. We just have the WorkZone itself. But if we go down to the entitlements section and we search Task Center, there we see we have the Build Default Application and Service Entitlement. And we'll be ready to move on to the next step. And now we're ready to create the instances of the Task Center. Again, we'll be creating both an application to interactively access the Task Center and a service instance to programmatically interact with it. And again, each of these will take a few seconds to create. I have shortened the video time, however, so it does take a little bit longer in reality. Now that it is successful, let's switch over to the BTP cockpit and we'll be able to see the new instances under instances and subscriptions. And there we are, the Task Center in applications and Task Center service in the instances. So this task is complete. And now we need access to the Task Center as well. So it's another thing that's really great about the Cloud Integration Automation Service is, again, it doesn't just provision the initial services, but also make sure that a lot of the things that in the past would have been post setup steps, like access to them, are automatically created. Even the row collections are created, but it also assigns them to your initial setup user. So you're ready to immediately test things. And I like that about this particular tool. And now we're going to set the entitlements for SAP Build apps. So we'll give it just a minute to checking that. And I'm just going back to make sure that rerunning that step didn't change something. So I'll go in again. It's still here. It still has one quota assigned to it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step and find out. So I'll say that this is complete. Now we're going to have our real test to see if we did the right thing in the past step. Because we come to the step where we're going to subscribe to SAP Build apps. And of course, this step can't be successful if the entitlement step wasn't correct. We see that the step has completed, though, so we know now that everything is fine with the entitlement and with Build apps itself. If we come here and we look at the instances of subscriptions, we see that we have the SAP Build apps with Build default. So we can go ahead and mark this as complete. Now we come to a step where we need to add some manual information. The tool couldn't extract out from Build apps its application URL, and that will be needed later in the setup steps. So we're going to come back to the cockpit. We can get that URL there from the application subscription. When we put it back into the parameters of the Cloud Integration Automation Service, and now this value will be used in later steps. Only once it has all those values can we complete the task. Now, I'd like to test the Build app subscription that we just set up. But before we do that, we need authorization. And this is where the additional steps to also assign the row collections to our user are a really nice addition of this tool. So we're going to do that, and we're going to have the both Build apps administrator and developer roles, or row collections, I should say, created and assigned to our user. And that's completed now, but let's just go over again and check our user, make sure they're there. Yep, sure enough, we can see the row collections have automatically been assigned to our user. So we know that this step is complete, and we can go back and mark it, task completed, and move on. Now that we have SAP Build apps configured, it's time for SAP Build process automation. This is going to follow a similar task pattern that will first create the entitlements for process automation and the process automation service, and then we'll create the application subscription and the service instance. So our entitlements have been created, and if we go to the BTP cockpit, we see that we now have SAP Build process automation entitlements. This task is complete, and we can mark it as such and move on. All right, now we have the Activate SAP Build process automation, and particularly the first step here to create the application subscription. I've cut the time down in the video considerably. It is not unusual for this to take 30 to 45 minutes. So I certainly didn't want to extend the video by that long. I didn't even want to record that long. So I stopped the video recording and restarted it. But, after waiting, my task did come back to complete, and I see that I have the subscription and the service instance, and I can continue with the task completion like we have all the others. Just be aware of the longer time that this one takes than all the other steps so far. And now for the roles for SAP Build process automation. We have 4 different roles this time. So it takes slightly longer to create them all, but we can go into the BTP cockpit and we see that all 4 roles are there and properly assigned to my user. So this step is now complete as well. And now we'll create destinations, BTP destinations for accessing business process automation. You see here from the manual steps that you'd have to do, there's quite a bit of configuration on these destinations. This is where the Cloud Integration Automation Service is superior to the boosters of old because it does things like this that would have been post-processing steps in the past. We return to the BTP cockpit and look at our destinations, we'll see that we have 2 new ones for SAP Process Automation Service and SAP Process Automation Service User Access. So this is successful. We can mark the task complete. Now we enter into some of the post-processing steps as part of the Cloud Integration Automation Service setup of SAP Build. This particular step is to create a content provider in SAP Build Workzone, like an S4 system that we can connect to. Now, unlike the other steps, there's no automation steps that are part of this. It only has manual instructions. So I'm going to put the manual instructions from the Cloud Integration Automation Service on one side of the screen, and I'm going to put the BTP cockpit where we'll be working on the other side. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the SAP Build Workzone from the subscriptions. And I'm going to log in with my user, and I'm going to have the necessary authorizations because that was all set up in an earlier step for us. This is our first time logging in and really trying out the setup of one of these new services. But this allows us to do some post-processing here. So I'm going to go ahead and I got my username and password. I'll go ahead and log in. And this is going to bring us into the site manager of the SAP Build Workzone Standard Edition. And from here, I can go to the site manager and then the channel manager. There we are. And you see there is a connect to the application router here, but we want to create a new provider, a content provider. And basically we'll just follow along and set up an S/4HANA Private Cloud Edition content provider. And we'll give it the same ID that it says here, build content. And you have to have some destinations already created. So these are existing BTP destinations. They were already set up in my environment, and they connect to an S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition system. So we'll just choose those. And of course, if your system configuration needs to change, you just change it in the BTP destination itself. We don't have to come back in here and change it. It's one of the nice things about using BTP destinations. We'll go ahead and set the automatically add all content to subaccounts true. Use the identity provider service to provision user authorization. And I'm just reading here, include group and catalog assignments. We could choose here, but I'm going to choose not to include them all automatically. And there we are. It is creating this now. We'll give this just a moment to finish up. And there we are. And I actually did get an error message here because it could not connect to my S/4HANA backend system. That's because this was actually a template BTP destination. It didn't actually connect to a real S4 system, but if it had, this would have completed the connection. We did enough here, though, to test out the step is successful. And if you have a real S4 system at the endpoint of your BTP destination, of course, it will work for you. So at this point, I'll go ahead and mark this task as completed. And this is another manual post-processing step that's documented via the Cloud Integration Automation Service. We want to enable notifications in SAP Build Workzone And to do that, we need to go into SAP Build Work Zone again and go to the Site Manager and the Settings, and then the Notification tab. And this will use email and generate credentials for connecting to and sending notifications out of the Build Work Zone environment. So we have all these values that were generated here in the tooling, and we need to bring them back into the Cloud Integration Automation Service so it can then write them into the subsequent services and steps. So to do the connectivity for us, even though we needed to go manually generate these credentials in the tooling. Over the client secret. And now that we have all the values entered from the Build Work Zone settings, we can say task complete, and that will propagate these settings into the dependent services. With that, this step is completed as well. This is another destination creation step. So we're going to create a BTP destination for the alert notification service so we can trigger them from our applications, trigger alerts from our applications. I really like these steps because if you've ever set up destinations, there's a lot of different parameters that can go into the destinations, and this greatly simplifies things. So this is part of the reason why we preserve those settings from the previous step into the Cloud Integration Automation setup. They now carry over into this step and get written into the destination along with all these other settings as well. So if we look at our alert notification, I just need to make sure I got the name right. Yeah, alert notification connectivity, ANS. We see that the destination exists, so we can mark that one as complete. In this step, we need to update the existing destinations with some additional properties so that they can be properly used in SAP Build Process Automation. So this is going to tie the alert notification service together with the Build Process Automation service via these updated destinations. Now, I tried running the automation execution and actually didn't update the status at all. But then when I went in and looked at the log, I was getting this error message. I don't really understand what it was giving me, a configuration entry not found. So I decided to simply follow the instructions and do this one manually as well. It's not a terribly difficult one, and it tells you exactly what you need to do. So we'll go into each of the 2 destinations that it specified, and most of the settings are there, but we just need to add some additional properties. So for this one, we'll add the property SAP Process Automation, Notifications UI, and let it know that it should use the Task Center for the notifications user interface. There we are. That's the only thing we need to add to that destination. Now we need to find the Build Process Automation destination, and we'll follow the same process to edit this one. And it already has a bunch of properties, but we'll add another one for the notifications enabled. And I have a little problem here getting it to use a lowercase t. It keeps wanting to autocomplete with one of the possible values with an uppercase t. So I decided to just finish typing it here and then come back and update that. So TC notifications enabled, false. It doesn't need to handle the notifications because that will be deferred to the task center. So get that capital T off of there. There we go. And we go ahead, save that. And now that we have done this step manually, go back to the Cloud Integration Automation Service, say the task is completed. And because we did it manually, we have to confirm it like we did the other ones that produced an error and then had to be completed manually. And here we have another post-processing step that needs to be done manually. We want to create a system in the Cloud Identity Service for connecting to and reading the users that are available in Cloud Identity Service. So we're going to go back over to our trust configuration, and that has all the details about our external identity service. And from here, there's a link to take us into the administrative console for the Cloud Identity Service. So while that's pulling up, I'm just going to get to the manual steps here so I can follow along. We want to go to users and authorizations, and then administrators. And under the administrators, we're going to add a system. So this will be a system user for system-to-system communications. Doesn't really matter what you name it. I'll do give it some sort of test of my name because this is a shared environment, so other people know who's using it. And now we need to set the authorizations. We don't need a whole lot of authorizations for this user. Basically, just read authorizations. So we'll turn off most everything else. There we are. And now we'll save this. And now we need to go to the secret section so that we can generate a client ID and client secret for this user. And we'll just add a secret. Give it a short description. We want this to never expire. There's my test secret. Never expire. Save that. And it's generated a client ID and a client secret. Now we're going to need to take this configuration that was generated, similar to some other steps, and put it back into the Cloud Integration Automation Service so that these settings can be written into the calling destinations and service instances. So this would be preserved for us. Save that, and it's now saved into our parameters, and then we will mark this as task completed. Now for a step that will create our BTP destination that allows us to connect to the identity authentication service. Again, I'm going to have to update the URL. This one is still my old one. I should have saved that previous after I updated it, but now I'll save it and then it'll have it. And this will then generate a BTP destination so that we can programmatically interact with the identity authentication service and get list of users and their group assignments. So that'll use the configuration from the previous step. If we go back over to the BTP cockpit and load up the destinations, we will see that it has created the destination for us, and it is pointing to our identity authorization system. So we'll go ahead and complete this task. And we come to the final step that we're going to perform inside the Cloud Integration Automation Service, and that's to import a default site into SAP Build Work Zone. So there's a sample default site built into the Cloud Integration Automation Service, and we're just going to save that. I'm going to download it here and put it in my downloads folder so it's easy to find. And now the instructions tell us that we need to open SAP Build Work Zone. So I'll come back over here to the BTP cockpit and pull up the subscription for Build Work Zone. And we're in the site manager again, and we can just say import site. We'll browse to my downloads folder where I saved that sample site. There it is. And we'll agree and import it. So just take a few seconds to process. And we can see that it has successfully brought in the default site. All right, we could test it at this point as well. If we go back to the site directory and refresh here, we will see the default site has been created, and I can go ahead and open the default site. There we are. I do get an error message, but this is to be expected. If we look at the details, it says that I actually have no spaces assigned to me because I haven't done any configuration of the roles, the groups, and things like that. So there's nothing to show here yet. We'll mark this last step as complete. And with that, all the steps of the Cloud Integration Automation Service for SAP Build are completed. If we go back out of the workflow and go back to the Cloud Integration Automation Service overview, we will navigate here in just a second. I see an executive summary for the overall execution, and I can say complete the overall execution. That will actually mark everything as completed, and it will disappear from my task list. I can still see it, though, if I were to come here and change the filter instead of only showing me running task. If I alter the filter status to say also show me completed or canceled ones, then we'll see the provisioning of SAP Build. It was completed successfully. And anytime I can come back here and I can look at the logs, the details of everything that we've set up so far. The remaining steps of the setup are not covered by the Cloud Integration Automation Service. Instead, we'll go back to the documentation, and we see here that there are post-Cloud Integration Automation Service configuration steps that need to be done, and there's a whole list of them. We need to set up Business Application Studio, mobile services, ABAP, and we'll go through the rest of these steps in this video. But we're going to start here with the Business Application Studio. So I'll do like I did before and put the help on one side with all the steps, and then we'll perform the steps in the BTP cockpit on the other side. These are going to be very similar steps to the kinds of things that we did in the Cloud Integration Automation Service. We're going to need to add the entitlement first. So I'll come here to Entitlements, and we'll search for the Business Application Studio. There it is. There's one for trial and one for build default. We want the one for build default. So go ahead and add that service plan to your entitlements. And we can also, I need to save it. And now that it is entitled, once it finishes saving, of course, we'll be able to go to instances and subscriptions. All right, go to instances and subscriptions. And now we'll create a subscription to the application or Business Application Studio. There, Business Application Studio. And it goes to build default. That is our application. And it'll take a second for it to create. Once it does, we have our subscription, but we don't want to launch it just yet, because if we did, we would get a not authorized. We need to create the role collections and then assign them to our user so that we'll be able to test. So this one is for the lobby developer. Go ahead and create the role collection. So you're seeing some of the things also that the previous tool automated for us, where we just had to choose the step and we didn't have to add the roles manually. Here we'll have to find the roles that it specifies in the help. So it wants the registry developer role. Scroll down, find registry developer. There it is. And we'll add that to our role collection. Just double checking that I have the right one. Yep. And now, while we're in here, we can also assign users directly from the role collection dialog. So I'll say that I want to take my user from the custom identity provider. And of course, my user ID is the same as my email address. And we'll go ahead and save that. That will create the role collection and immediately assign it to my user. And now that I have the authorization for this, you see the lobby developer there. We'll also be able, we want to take the Business Application Studio developer role as well and also assign that to my user. So we'll come in here and we'll do the same. Take my user, Slide it. There we are. Now I fully have authorizations that I need to run the application. So I'll be able to go back to instances and subscriptions, find the Business Application Studio entry, and I can launch it. And I don't think we need the help documentation anymore. So we'll go ahead and make this full screen. And what we'll see is actually, instead of launching the Business Application Studio directly, it brings us to the SAP Build lobby. And for the first time, we're seeing the results of many of the things that we set up. Because if we go to create a new application, our new project, we'll see application, automated process, business site. So this is our work zone, our business process automation, our build apps, and now the Business Application Studio. We see all the different capabilities and types of things that we can create are all surfaced thanks to all the many steps that have been automated for us up to this point. If we go into the application, we see here, we also have full stack, we have Node.js, Java. ABAP wouldn't work yet because we haven't configured an ABAP system, but you see the full range of capabilities that we have set up. Now we're ready to set up the mobile services, the next in the list of from the documentation help. So we'll once again follow along in the from the help to the BTP cockpit. Now this one does not actually need a service instance nor a subscription. We only have to add the quota or the entitlement for this. So we'll go to the entitlement section of the BTP cockpit, and we'll go ahead and add the entitlement here, or add the service plan, I should say, for mobile services. There, mobile services, and we want to add the build default. And actually, if you want to use the service with build code, you could also add that service plan as well. But that is all we need to do. We'll save. And this one's a little shorter and easier than the others because we don't have to create the instance or any subscriptions. So at this point, we have a ready to use mobile services as well. Now we're going to add the ABAP runtime so that we have both the ABAP and the Cloud Foundry runtime available for development. We could have also added the Kima runtime. I chose just to focus on Cloud Foundry and ABAP. The Kima runtime would be an optional runtime that you could add as well. Here, again, we're going to do this manually. We're going to start by adding entitlements. So there's multiple service plans that we have to add, and to do that, we're going to start by choosing the ABAP environment. We're going to add the build runtime, but then we also need ABAP compute for the ABAP application server and HANA compute for the database that runs under each ABAP instance. So choosing those three and just double checking against the documentation to make sure that I've added everything that I need to. Yes, I have the build runtime, the ABAP compute, and the HANA compute. So I'll go ahead and add those service plans. And then actually, I need another service plan for the web access so that we do have HTTP access to our ABAP system. So we'll go ahead and add that as well. Yes, although the documentation says web access for ABAP Canary, it's actually just web access for ABAP. We'll go ahead and save that. And now make it a little larger because in addition to adding those service plans, I need to configure the quota. The default quota of 1 unit is not enough. So I'm going to need at least 2 units of ABAP and 2 units of HANA. Now, of course, your system sizing could vary. You could need more than that. But in order to start the system, I need at least 2 units. So I'll go ahead and save that configuration change to the quota units. And then I'll be able to go back over to instances and subscriptions. And I will start the process of creating my ABAP system. We do this the same way we did many of the others. We start by creating an instance of the ABAP environment. We actually want this to live within Cloud Foundry. So it will live within our build space. We want to say who our system administrator is going to be. It's going to be me again. We can configure some typical ABAP parameters like the system ID, do a little of the sizing configuration. I'm going to keep everything at the defaults and go ahead and say create. Now, creation is in progress, and this can take a little while, as the documentation says. Actually took several hours for me, and we don't want to sit here in the video and watch that. So I've skipped ahead. It's now completed creating my ABAP system, and I want to create a service key as well. This isn't created automatically, but a service key is what you need to be able to connect the ABAP development tools to this system as well. So I'll create that, and then you'll notice I'm going to go ahead and download that service key. Once it's created, it has all the connection information and the credentials to be able to connect to the ABAP backend system. So I'll just save that locally. I didn't show the setup process of ABAP development tools, but of course, if you're an ABAP developer, you already know how to do that. But now I have the service key for this particular system. And finally, I want to set up an instance of the web access for ABAP as well. This doesn't take very long. Say create, and it come back right away, or pretty much right away. I didn't even cut the time on that one. It was pretty short. If you say go to application on this one, it will launch a page that just lets you know that the web access works. There's no actual connect Fiori Launchpad from this access point. We need to go back to the ABAP Runtime instance itself. And if we click on that, it will open the Fiori Launchpad, or at least the authentication for it. That's where it takes me. And my ABAP configuration for ABAP Runtime is now complete. Actually, while we wait for the ABAP system to be created, we're going to go over and set up the next service, because we don't have to do these completely sequentially in order. We're going to set up the application framework. Now, this is a centralized application router, which will make it easier for deploying multiple SAP UI5 applications in your development environment. So we need to first add the entitlement for this service, as we've done for all the others. So we'll find application front end service, and we'll add the build default service plan and save it as we've done the others. There's no quota to set up on this. We'll also, while we're in here, we'll add the developer plan as well. This is an optional plan, but it helps us with the deployment of applications, which we plan to do in this environment. So we'll go ahead and add that. Now that we have our entitlements, we can go over and create the subscription. So we'll choose application front end service. And for the plan, we will choose the build default subscription. And this will take a few seconds to create. Now that we're subscribed, now we can set up the security on this. So we'll give ourselves the initial security needed to access and deploy applications to the application front end. So there is an existing, or we're going to create a new role collection here. I'm just going to name it application front end. And then we will add the roles to it. As described in the help documentation, we need to add the application front end developer. And there's also a viewer role if you want anybody to be able to view applications that are deployed to the application front end. While we're in here, we'll go ahead and grant this new role collection to ourselves, so we'll be able to test immediately as well. There we are. Save that. And now that the security is set up, we can go back to the instances and subscriptions. And if you launch this, it's going to take you to a little administrative page on the next steps and how you can access the application front end from CLI. But the actual way that we access the administrative tool is to go back to the BTP cockpit, because this is built into the BTP cockpit, unlike some of the other subscriptions we've had. It will show up here under HTML5 applications in the dedicated left-hand menu. And what we'll see is here's our deployed managed applications that are available in the application front end. And you see that there are many already deployed out there as part of the build work zone and the process automation. Next, we're going to set up the cloud transportation management. This is a tool that helps you move your content from one environment to another, like from dev to test to production. And it can be used for a variety of different content like that created by SAP Build Work Zone, Build Process Automation, Build Apps, even ABAP development. So we're going to first add the entitlement as well. So we'll go into Add Service Plans, and we will search for the Cloud Transport. There we are, Cloud Transport Management, and we need the Build Runtime. That is the application itself. There's also some other available plans for programmatic access if you need it. Now that we're saved, we'll go over to Instances and Subscriptions, and we will create the application subscription for Cloud Transportation Management, Build Runtime Plan. That is the plan for the subscription, and we'll go ahead and hit Create. This will take a few seconds to create. And now that it has created, we have to go add the security. So we'll, again, create a custom row collection for the new roles that have been added to our environment. Make sure I get the right one. Yeah. But we'll go ahead and create a new row collection called Cloud Transport Management. And then we'll go in and add our roles to this. Looking for an administrator role. There we are. Although it says administrator role in the documentation, it actually is transport operator. So there seems to be a little incorrect information there in the help document, but that was easy enough to find. I actually found it by the, and just to double check here, I'm looking to see if there's anything else that I'm missing. So we'll add the transport operator role. And we'll go ahead and assign that to my user. That way we'll be all set up to test this out right away. So we can launch the Cloud Transport Management tool from Instances and Subscriptions. And then just click on the link, and we'll open in a new tab. And here we have it, the Cloud Transport Management tool. And of course, you could then do setup and follow the instructions for the various different types of content. You'd have to set up transport connections to the various systems and routes. But that would be a separate video of its own to show you how to do all that. But we are set up and ready to use this service. Next, we're going to set up the continuous integration and delivery service. Now, this is a very similar tool to the Cloud Transportation Management tool. It serves to help both build your applications, but then do continuous incremental builds, as well as deliver them into downstream environments. This is a tool that you'll often use in combination with building and deploying CAP applications, both Node.js and Java-based applications. So to set up this particular tool, we will add the entitlement again, continuous integration delivery, and the build runtime, and we'll save the entitlement, Give it a second to save. Once we do, then we can go ahead and create the subscription to the tool, the subscriptions, and create the subscription, cloud integration and delivery, build runtime. Once that's created, we'll have the ability to go in and add the roles to our user. So this tells us which roles we need. I'll come here, assign the row collections. And there are the 2 row collections. This one we didn't have to manually create a row collection for. The row collections were imported, and we add them directly to our user. Now let's test this. Let's go back to instances and subscriptions, find the continuous integration and delivery service, and click on it to launch the service in a new tab, or the application in a new tab. And here we have the continuous integration delivery service. Of course, we'd have to set up credentials and connections to repositories for your particular environment, but then you would be ready to use the service. The final additional service we're going to install is the document management service. So it's a very similar process to all the ones we've set up so far. We'll begin by setting up the entitlement. So we'll add the service plan for document management service. And there are 2 here, both the repository and the integration option. We're going to set up the repository option. The integration option is for programmatic access. We'll actually add both of those here at the same time, and we'll save those. Just checking the additional documentation here that's related to this item. There, we'll go back to instances and subscriptions, and we'll go ahead and create a new application subscription for the document management service. Well, actually, I'm sorry, we're creating an instance of the document management service integration option. We'll have to give it an instance name. And there are no additional parameters. So we can go ahead and go to the end of the process. We'll hit create. And we'll see that it will take a few seconds for this one to finish creating. And now that it's done, we have our final bit installed. We can see it here in instances and subscriptions. There's our document management service. And we've come to the end of the setup process. We can go ahead and launch the Business Application Studio, which of course is going to open the SAP Build lobby. And here we can explore all the different development aspects that have now been set up through the process that we've seen in the last hour. Of course, the Build lobby is our central entry point to doing development in any of the aspects and tools that we have set up here. We have the ability to create new project types of application, automation, business sites. We drill into application. We can see we have full stack applications, front end applications. Likewise, we can come here and we can set up automated processes as well. Here we have, we could drill into creating a new process. Let's just go ahead. Yeah, back out there. We could also do a business site. There we see most of the build work zone capabilities have been configured and ready to use. For instance, I could start here. It would take me into the content manager of the build work zone. So that's all fully working. I could also create a project for, well, let's go ahead and do it, an application. And let's say a front end application. And here we could do Fiori, or we could do a web application by visually building it. That would be SAP Build Apps would be the tool that will be launched. And we'll go ahead and give it a little project name. Terribly important here. Just test. verifying, and we can go ahead and hit create, and it will launch the Build Apps tooling here for us in another tab. It's actually creating the empty project application, and there we have it in the Build Apps design environment. So that's all working fine. Now we can come back here and we can create another project. For instance, I could create a application and choose full stack. Now I'd be creating a CAP or an ABAP application. For instance, I could say Java or Node.js CAP application, and it would need to create a dev space and launch that in the Business Application Studio for me to further do development. I can also come here to the dev space and directly interact with the Business Application Studio, even create a manual dev space still. All the capabilities to customize dev spaces are here, but if you want the project to create it for you, you also have that option from the lobby. So kind of the best of both worlds, depending on how you want to handle that. Yeah, let's go ahead and create another project here. This time, let's do an automated process. And we will create a process, and this is going to launch the SAP Process Automation tool. So you'll see that launching here in just a second. There's launching the Build Process Automation in another window. Accept the disclaimer the first time we come in, and then it's going to ask us to further name our project and start the development of it. I won't take you through all the development aspects, but here we've touched on the majority of the tools that we've set up throughout this entire process we've seen here. So you see that our environment is configured and ready for our developers to begin working in all these different types of tools.